guys, welcome. Good morning. My name is Lori Muskies and I am an ESC CACFP specialist in Region 14. And with me this morning is Brenda Tyler from Region 15. And we love talking about feeding infants. So thank you for joining us. I think we can safely say that watching babies giggle makes us smile, but what about feeding infants in the CACFP? There are some aspects that can be frustrating and maybe cause a momentary frown, plenty of things that cause us to smile, and maybe a few things that make us giddy with a chuckle or two. So again, I'm going to turn on the annotate tool and ask you to use that text function and enter one thing in each box that applies to your experience with feeding infants. And of course, you can always let us know in the chat too. So I've got that annotate on. So again, go to the top of the screen where it says view options, click that down arrow, you'll see annotate. If you click on that, you get an annotate toolbar, look for the big T, and that will give you the text function. Then go and click on the slide. So example, if I wanted to write something here of something that makes me frown when feeding infants, I would click there and be able to type. So we're looking for one thing that causes us to frown, one to cause us to smile, and one that makes us giggle. So watching a kiddo eat, especially these infants when they're trying new foods, right? Sometimes they can really make some funny faces, and we'll actually have some videos where we see that here in a moment. I'm gonna move some of these around. Oh yeah, the mess. Brenda, the mess can be a little frown causing. When they don't eat. That's part of feeding cues, which we're not going to quite get into today, but yeah, I can see that. All right, feeding themselves, yes, is very cute as well. Just as a reminder, if you're frustrated with how big your text is, you can go to Format and make your font just a little bit smaller, and it might fit a little bit easier. New foods. Thank you guys. Yeah. Sharing. They do like to share, don't they? They even want to feed you sometimes. Somebody found that text tool that's smaller. Thanks for trying that out. Making sounds of enjoying lots of things, Brenda, that folks are finding to make them giggle. Okay, I'm going to close this. Annotate in 3, 2, 1. Takes me just a second I like to make sure that we save these, then I'll clear those drawings and move on here. So before we dive into the topic of feeding infants, we want to make sure that everyone is aware of the CACFP live tools that we have available. So the reminder binder contains most of the links to the resources that we will be talking about today, and others are found on the ESC Live Google site, and we'll be providing those links to you in the chat. Again, I want to point out that this pen with page numbers down here at the bottom, and there are different places on the slide, just depending on where we have room, indicates that that is the page we're on in the reminder binder. Either more information, or sometimes we're doing activities in the reminder binder. So just look out for that pen and page number so you know where to go. Now, I want to actually go to the reminder binder and just give you a couple of hints. If you want to actually stay in your computer and edit digitally, what you can do is go to File and make a copy. You'll make a copy of the entire presentation, or if you just want to, you can enter page numbers just for today's module if you want to make a copy of just today's module. And then you'll be able to use all the edit functions. You'll be able to write, type, highlight, put in shapes, and then you can also add notes in the speaker notes. Now, if you want to print it, you'll want to go to File and then download, and you'll download the PDF and then print the PDF. It just prints a whole lot quicker than printing the actual slides. So I wanted to give you those couple of tips about the reminder binder. Now, in the reminder binder on page 5, you'll find an action plan. So at the end of today's session, we're going to provide a link to a form that will provide a certificate for you that shows that you actually participated in today's session. And one of the questions on that form is for you to enter 3 action plan or action items that you want to do based on the information provided today. So if you're able to actually write those action steps down as we go through today, or it even can be on a sheet of paper, just have those ready to go. And that way you can go in, fill that form out really quickly and get your certificate. Today, we're trying another tool, and I'm not going to talk too much about it, but we did make a fillable PDF, which Carolyn's going to provide in the chat, that you can get just of today's module and just a couple of the introductory pages as well, like with Zoom tips and things like that. Just please note that in order for you to be able to use it as a fillable form, you're going to need to download it. And then that also makes the hyperlinks available as well. It also works in your phone. In my phone, I actually had to, it was fillable just in the browser, but I had to actually go into a PDF reader or editor app in order to get the hyperlinks to work. So those are just a couple of tips there. Just a reminder that we're not going to cover the entire scope of feeding infants. No way we could in an hour and a half, but you're still responsible for knowing and understanding all of the policies that you find in our TDA CACFP handbooks, anything that comes from USDA, like the USDA policy memos, and any communication that comes from TDA. Very often it's through your local ESC CACFP specialist about operating the program is still your responsibility. Today, we're going to review information about these feeding infant topics on the slide, and most importantly, make sure that everyone knows where to go to find more information and help for each one of them. So USDA has some fantastic resources for feeding infants and toddlers, and they seem to keep adding to them. And within the last couple of months, they've added more resources to the feeding infants repertoire, and we want to make sure that you all know about them. A couple of years ago, starting in 2017, the infant meal pattern changed a little bit. First, we went from feeding 3 different age groups to only 2. And secondly, sites and providers began to be able to claim infant meals when mothers breastfed on site. And also they began offering other support for breastfeeding. Thirdly, fruits and vegetables were added as a required component at SNAC. And finally, many providers were already serving ready-to-eat cereals to older infants, and the new meal pattern does allow for those cereals to be creditable at SNAP. So I'm going to turn on the annotate again, take a moment and stamp which of these 4 infant meal pattern improvements have been your favorite in the last couple of years. All right, so that annotate should be available for you now, and you're going to click on the stamp tool on your toolbar. Let us know, what are your favorites that have been added since 2017? Thanks, Ben. All right, quite a few are enjoying this fruits and vegetables at snack, which is great. I love it. All right. Yeah, and I'm not surprised by that ready-to-eat cereal at snack, because a lot of us were already doing that anyway, right? Just as a reminder, page 68, there's a place for you to make notes or see this particular chart as well. All right, I'm going to close this annotate option in 3, 2, 1. All right, and we'll save that and clear. So if you're new to the CACFP or new to feeding infants, you might be wondering where you can find more information about feeding infants. Brenda, sorry, I just was going to jump right on
okay.
in
The Feeding Infant Guide, which we refer to as the FIG, is designed to help childcare providers understand that the CACFP infant meal pattern requirements. And it includes a list of infant foods that are credible and not credible. You'll find a link to this guide on page 69 of your reminder binder. It also includes best practices for feeding babies in your care in a way that supports their individual growth and development. Remember that all child care centers and daycare homes that participate in the CACFP must offer meals to all infants in their care, and this guide helps you do that. Another way to use this guide is to help answer any questions that you have about what to feed babies and how to offer infant meals that are reimbursable.
All right, thanks, Brenda. We're going to think about the infant meal pattern just a little bit differently this morning. A lot of the required infant foods are the same for all types of meals and snacks for each of the age groups, but there are just a few differences.
They also have, I don't know, and I would tell you.
Oh, wait, thanks. All right, for example, infants that are 0 to 5 months or until the parent or guardian determines that that infant is developmentally ready for solids, they only receive infant formula or breast milk for all meals and snacks. So that's one thing that's the same.
Even after that, 6-11-month-olds or developmentally ready infants must be offered breast milk or formula as a required component for every meal and snack.
Okay, so now take a look at the screen. The required components for breakfast, lunch, and supper over here on the left and in orange for the 6 to 11-month age group. And then the required components for snack for 6 to 11-month-olds is over here in blue on the right side. So in addition to infant formula or breast milk, you also notice a couple of other food items or components that are listed for these 6 to 11-month-old age groups for both the meals over here and the snacks over here. So infant cereal is an option as an alternative to a meat alternate at breakfast, lunch, or supper. And it's also an option at snack. It can be used instead of a bread, cracker, or ready to eat cereal. And then finally, you'll notice that now the vegetable or fruit or a combination, that component is required for breakfast, lunch, and supper. And it is also required at snack.
Okay, so now Lori will turn on the annotate tool and we'll ask you to list the differences that you see between the required components for breakfast, lunch, and dinner for 6 to 11-month-olds and the required components for snack for 6 to 11 months old. If you are not able to annotate, please feel free to use the chat.
No, thanks, Brenda. So again, you're looking at differences between this list of required components and this list of required components. We'll give you several seconds to look at those and kind of analyze them. And again, use your annotate feature at the top by pushing the down arrow next to view options and then getting that annotate toolbar and clicking on the big T. And remember, you can format those to be a little bit smaller. It might be easier for you to use as well.
Okay, we're seeing some bread or crackers, so ready to eat cereal. Bread or crackers in the chat. Let's see what else we see. Ready to eat cereals only count at snack. A lot of bread and crackers, Lori.
Yeah. There's one other thing. There we go. I think I've seen them all now. I see them all. Okay, so I'm going to turn off the annotate here in 3, 2, 1, so we can make sure and talk about exactly what we're looking at. Someone got innovative up here and actually was circling. That's a great idea as well. So I see the one, something about meat here. So meat alternate is a required component at breakfast, lunch, and supper, and it's not during snack. And then it's only at snack where we can offer a bread, cracker, or ready to eat cereal, which is important. Sometimes we get confused and we offer that ready to eat cereal at breakfast, which it actually doesn't count towards that reimbursable meal at all. So thank you guys for your participation in that. That was awesome. We weren't sure if we were if that made sense or not, but you guys totally followed along with this. So meal patterns not only tell us what the required components are for meals and snacks, they tell us how much we must offer to each infant as well. And we refer to that as minimum serving size. We don't list those minimum serving sizes here, but there are some differences in the minimum required amounts for some of the required foods or components between meals and snacks. So for our next activity, you might want to refer to the meal pattern. We're going to be talking about 6 to 11-month-olds specifically. And Carolyn's going to go ahead and give you that link in the chat so that you can be prepared for our next activity. So look for that meal pattern in the chat. Of course, it's also linked in your reminder binder as well. You're going to need that list possibly, or that meal pattern for our next activity. So that activity is provided in the USDA training called Baby Food Lineup. So you can try this activity with your staff who work with infants, as well as, and you can find this link again in your reminder binder on page 70. So one more time, we've established that 0 to 5 months old really, or until they're developmentally ready, only receive formula or breast milk for all meals and snacks. So for this activity, we'll be referring to babies that are developmentally ready for solid foods and also ready for the full minimum required amounts. Again, you might find it useful to use that infant meal pattern as we go through this. So let's move over there. Now, what's going to happen is I'm going to tell you a certain group. There's 4 meals. And for each meal, I'm going to ask a certain group to answer. And what I want you to do is, using your annotate tool, select the foods that would apply to the scenario that I'm going to read for you up here. So the first group is, if your cell phone ends in an even number, you're going to annotate by answering this question. So I'm going to turn on the annotate now and read the scenario. What can you offer baby Elizabeth as a part of a reimbursable lunch in the CACFP? Now, there's only 3 of these 6 foods that will work. So use your stamp tool and let me know which 3 of these components will be a part of a reimbursable meal at snack. Okay. All right, so I'm going to turn off the annotate. And the first 3 I saw, I believe, was the peach cobbler. I think this is formula, I can't see it anymore. And then the cereal. So let's submit this and see what we find out. So we didn't get them all right. Okay, so let me clear here. I'm going to save and clear so that we can talk about this a little bit. So all meals and snacks are going to require breast milk or formula. So just like we talked about on the meal pattern slide a second ago, ready-to-eat cereal is creditable at snack, but not at breakfast, lunch, or supper. So it could not be one of the creditable components for breakfast, lunch, or snack. Now, peach cobbler is considered an infant food dessert, and they are never creditable. But what is required at a breakfast is a fruit or vegetable. So avocado would count there, and a meat alternate or iron fortified infant cereal. And so the fish would have been appropriate for that required component. So the answers would have been the fish, the avocado, and the breast milk. Egg yolks are no longer creditable for infants in the CACFP, but whole eggs would count as a meat alternate. All right. Let's go to the next one. All right, so this is the group that needs to be ready for this one. If your cell phone ends in an odd number, I'm going to turn on that annotate for you. What can you offer baby Jonathan as a part of a reimbursable snack in the CACFP? So again, we're just selecting 3 foods. So if your cell phone ends in an odd number, go ahead and annotate on the screen which 3 foods would be a part of a reimbursable meal for snack in the CACFP. Okay. Quite a few there, so I'm going to disable annotate.
And remember, you can also use the chat.
Yeah, thanks, Brenda, for reminding me. All right, so what do you think has the most here, Brenda? So I think everybody got the message. Iron fortified infant formula,
Yep,
or breast milk
always
has
a
to be
must.
offered. It's always a must. What else should I click here? The bread, maybe. And then I'm going to do the carrots. I'm going to clear the drawings and submit so we can see here. All right, we got all those right. Some of you marked the beef and the yogurt, both are meat alternates, which is not a credible component or part of a reimbursable snack. It is for breakfast, lunch, and supper, but not snack. And then water doesn't contribute towards the CACFP meal pattern for infants at all. All right, let's go to the next one. Oh, we got kind of a pause here. There we go. All right. This group is if you got up before 7 a.m. this morning. I'd like for you to answer this one. Let me turn on the annotate again for you. What can you offer baby Victoria as a part of a reimbursable snack in the CACFP? So we're going to select 3 foods again. We can only select 3. So which 3 would be a part of a reimbursable snack? Go ahead and annotate if you got up before 7 this morning. Oh man, I feel like we're getting better. This is looking good to me. So I'm going to turn off annotate. So it looks like for sure we've got breast milk or iron fortified infant formula always. You guys got this perfect. So we can do a bread, cracker, ready to eat cereal, or iron fortified infant cereal for snack. And then fruit or vegetable is now a required component. So I think you guys got that. What do you think? Let's
Looks
see.
good.
Submit. Awesome. So yeah, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but whole milk, unless it's supported with a medical statement, is never creditable for an infant. And then we've got the meat alternates here that are not creditable during snack. Those are creditable at breakfast, lunch, and supper. So last one. And if you got up after 7 this morning, this is yours. Let me turn on that annotate. What can you offer baby Michael as a part of reimbursable breakfast in the CACFP? So we're back to breakfast again. We're back to breakfast, lunch, supper. Okay, got quite a few there. So I'll turn off that annotate. And let's talk about what we've got here. So looks like strawberries has quite a few. We've got the iron fortified infant cereal and the breast milk. I think this is good again, Brenda.
Yeah, I think so.
Let's see. Good job, everyone. Yeah, so you got it. Always breast milk or iron fortified infant formula. Our iron fortified infant cereal can be used interchangeably with the meat alternates. And then we need a fruit or vegetable. So you guys got it. So just as a reminder, we're often tempted to give that ready to eat cereal at breakfast, but it does not contribute towards the meal pattern at breakfast, lunch, or supper. All right, we'll go back to our slideshow here. Thank you guys for your participation. Again, if you were here early with us this morning, we spent some time playing emoji code, identifying some children's books. So this isn't an emoji that you see, but a picture. What children's books or series would you identify with this picture? So you can unmute and let us know, or just let us know in the chat. Anybody know?
Where's Waldo? There it is.
Good job, everyone. So our Waldo this morning is with the resource that we're going to need to use next, which is called the Infant Foods List.
Yes, we invite you to go find our Waldo with that list. We already mentioned the resource where you can find an infant food list that tells you what foods are credible and not credible, and provided the link for it. We'd like for some of you to enter the link of the resource into the chat for those who can't find it. So I'll give you a few seconds to do that. Again, if you had that link to that resource, enter it into the chat.
Yeah, so this is a link that Carolyn provided just a few slides back, and it's the resource that has the infant food list. Does anybody have it right on their fingertips? All right, Brenda, we're running a little behind. So I think what I'm going to do is go ahead and give folks a tip. If you were on your own, thank you, Pamela.
Yeah.
If you're on your own and don't have access to these links, a good way to find this list, because it's a list that we all need and probably use often, is to go to just any browser and type in USDA feeding infants, and it'll probably be your first option. And I'm going to show you what that looks like here. So I'm going to go to my browser and type in USDA feeding infants. And it's the first option, and you'll notice it has a date of 2019. So I'm going to go in there.
Yeah, so once you click on the entry, use the search button.
Yeah, so I'm going to go into English, but there is a Spanish version as well. All right, Brenda. And so.
Okay, yeah. So once you go in there, use the search button function on the page by holding down Control F at the same time. An entry box will appear.
And we're going to, type in Appendix
Yeah,
F.
and then we're going to type in Appendix F.
Yeah, so you'll see there in the table of contents is the infant foods list. So I'm just going to enter here until I get down there. And here it is. So this is what you're looking for. So go ahead and make sure you've got that resource up and at the infant food list as we go through this next activity that we have. Okay. So let me click through here a little bit. So yeah, that's where our Waldo is with that infant foods list. And we're going to be needing this list as we go through these next slides here. We're going to start looking at individual infant food items and determine if they are creditable or not. Again, you can use that Control F search function in the infant foods list to look up individual food items if you need some help. What we'd like for you to do is let us know in the chat if this infant food here that you see is creditable. You can type a C for creditable or NC for not creditable. And if you have time, or let us know why. Okay, Antonio says NC. I'm not sure IF, I'm not sure what that means. I'm seeing a lot of NCs, Brenda.
Yep, a lot of non-credibles.
Yeah, and sometimes it is confusing when there are two different foods in a commercially prepared food. But if all the foods in the jar are from the same required component, it is credible, and you can use the minimum serving size for that component. So in this case, we have apples and blueberries, both of which are fruits, but even if one of them was a vegetable, they're all from the same component mixed in the jar, and therefore it would be creditable. Here's the next one. We have a yogurt blend. If all of the information that we have about this product is on the screen, would it be creditable or not? So again, in the chat, you can type C for creditable or NC for not creditable. And if you have time, go ahead and let us know why.
So we're seeing a few non-credibles in the chat.
Okay, let us know why if you have time here. Okay, tapioca starch. So what we want to highlight on this one is just a very simple way to immediately identify if an infant food is not creditable. We have an example of mixed components here, Brenda.
Yep. Okay, so yes, yogurt is considered a meat alternate. And then of course, like the strawberry and banana puree is part of the vegetable fruit component. If all the information we have about this product is on the screen, it would not be credible.
Okay, and there are some methods for determining if commercially prepared infant foods with combined components might be creditable, and we've linked that information in the reminder binder on page 71. And Brenda, what else do we need to remember about creditable yogurt that we feed infants?
Well, it's true for all age groups, including infants, that yogurt must meet the sugar limits. A link to a resource about that can be found in the reminder binder. And I see some of those answers in the chat as far as sugar.
All right, good deal. So here is a product that we often see our friends and family giving their infants as a snack. Do you all consider this a creditable grain for a CACFP snack when feeding infants? So again, in the chat, You can say, you can type in a C for creditable or NC for not creditable. And again, if you have time, let us know why.
Okay,
Hands on top of it.
credible, credible, non-credible, credible whole grain.
Well, it is a mixed bag, isn't it? Yeah, although this item is made with whole grains, it is not labeled as a cracker or other grain item listed in the infant meal pattern or FIG. Instead, it's labeled as a baked grain snack, and it doesn't look like a ready-to-eat cereal. So this item would not qualify as a grain in the infant snack meal pattern. So let's move on to infant formula. We're going to cover the 3 criteria for determining creditable infant formulas by evaluating whether this formula is creditable or not. First, it must be labeled as an infant formula with iron or have a similar statement on the label.
Secondly, the nutrition label must indicate that there's at least 1 milligram of iron and 100 kilocalories.
Yeah. And then finally, the provider must ensure that the iron fortified infant formula is not on the FDA exempt formula list. If the formula is listed on that exempt formula list, the infant formula would not be creditable without a medical statement for disability. If it is not on the list and meets the first 2 criteria, then the formula is a creditable infant formula.
Okay, so Carolyn is going to drop a link to that list in the chat. If you are someone who must determine if infant formulas are credible or not, you might want to bookmark this list. It's the only way to know if formula is exempt or not exempt. It's also linked in the reminder binder on page 73.
Okay, so Carolyn just posted a link where you can go to that list. And I did see someone say, I have a hard time going back and forth. We don't all have the technology where it's really easy to go back and forth, and that's okay if you can't do it. But if you can copy some of these links into something that you can look at a little bit later, remember it's all linked in the reminder binder as well. So if you don't have the technology to toggle back and forth, that's okay. But if you do, we encourage you to do this. So based on those 3 criteria that we just gave you, would you say that this formula is creditable or not creditable? And you're going to let us know in the chat. And again, if you have time, let us know why. Now we're going to be quiet for about a minute to allow you to go and check out that FDA infant formula exempt list. Remember, once you get there, use Control F. Okay, make sure. I got a message that said I was muted, so I just wanted to make sure. So you want to make sure that you type in Nutramigen to that infant exempt list to see if it's on that list, because remember, if it is, then it is not a creditable formula. So we're going to give you about a minute to do that. Oh, Brenda, I can tell we have a lot of folks who works with infants, and
Yes.
they've also been to training, because this isn't always intuitive to know this, but you guys are correct. Edna was right on top of it immediately. And I just wanted to give other folks the opportunity to go check that list as well. But you guys are correct. This is not considered a creditable iron fortified infant formula unless it is supported by a medical statement for disability, because Nutramigen is on that FDA exempt list. So good job, everyone.
Great job, everybody.
Yeah. So here we have an infant scenario for you to think about that involves cow's milk. You'll remember a little bit earlier in that USDA game we were playing, I said, well, you would talk about cow's milk. Well, here it is. Let's take a look at this CE scenario that is on Brenda's desk.
Okay, so Jeremy is a 10-month-old infant. Jeremy's parents have indicated that they would like the center to provide and offer Jeremy the whole cow's milk instead of IFIF. Offered by the center. Is whole milk credible in this case?
Yeah, so we want to ask you, how would you think through the scenario in order to find the right answer? What resources would you use? There is a space in your reminder binder on page 74 to jot some thoughts down, or you can just write it down on a separate sheet of paper. So we're going to give you about 30 seconds again to think about it. So don't worry if it gets quiet for a few seconds. What we want you to do is think about, what resources would you go to in order to find the answer to this question? Okay, again, Brenda, we're running a little behind again. So when a question like this comes across your desk, even if you don't know the answer, I know that like all other ESC specialists, we go and find the answer in writing. So where would you go first?
For any infant question, I go to the FIG first. But sometimes questions like this need a little bit more clarification, and I go to the USDA CACFP policy memo regarding feeding infants for clarification.
Yeah, you're right, Brenda. Often we need to go to a couple of resources to get the full picture. So if a CE called you guys out there with this question, what would your answer be? Is this cow's milk creditable for a 10-month-old? You can use your reaction tool. Remember, we talked about that at the beginning. It's on your Zoom toolbar, your reaction tool, and there's a green check if you think it would be creditable, and then a red X if you think that it would not be creditable. And Brenda, what was your answer?
So the whole cow's milk for infants under the age of 12 months is only credible as a substitute for IFIF when the request includes a medical statement for a disability that is signed by a medical authority and indicating that the whole milk should be substituted for IFIF.
Yeah, and it looks like most of our participants who answered agree with you. I don't see any checks at all. So it is important to note that the FIG provides most of the information that we needed in order to make that determination. However, it only says that you need a medical statement. So the policy memo does provide some more information about the type of medical statement and that it must be for a disability. And Brenda will talk more about substitutions a little bit later. So just like cow's milk is not normally appropriate for infants under 12 months of age, there are other foods that are not appropriate for infants until they are considered developmentally ready. And what are they developmentally ready for? Solid foods. Even if we have determined that infant food items are creditable, we don't start feeding infants solid foods until they are developmentally ready as determined by their parent or guardian. However, it is helpful if caretakers can identify signs of developmental readiness in order to better communicate with the parents and guardians of infants. So we're going to take another look at it at a video. There are 4 different takes of babies eating, and what we would like for you to do is identify the babies that show signs of developmentally readiness for solid foods based on the criteria shown on the slide, which is basically they can sit in a chair with good head control, and that whenever you feed them, the food is pushed to the back of the mouth and down the throat instead of back out. Okay, so those are basically what we're looking for. And in your reminder binder, there's a place for you to mark DR for developmentally ready and NDR for not developmentally ready next to the 4 different babies. If you don't have your reminder binder, feel free to write down your answers on a piece of paper or go ahead and let us know in the chat. So here's the video. sometimes it's a little bit hard to tell, and Sherry, you can go. Sherry's going to put the answers in the chat, and then if I can have another co-host clear the X responses that we see in the participant list as well, so that we don't have that confusion a little bit later. So that first take was of twins, it looked like, and they were sitting up okay, but whenever they were fed, that food came right back out. So they may not be quite ready. The second one was laid back. The baby wasn't sitting up at all. And then you noticed it was very thinned out, the food they were giving, which of course we start babies with, but they weren't quite there in terms of that sign of being able to sit up with good head control. The third one was sitting up. They weren't eating, but they were playing, had great control, sitting up with their head. And then finally, that last baby we saw taking the food in and swallowing it. So thank you guys for your participation there. And if Sherry's not available, would one of the rest of you go ahead and put the answers in the chat, please, for that, so they can make sure they have it right in their reminder binder.
I think she did already.
She
put
did
it in there. Yes,
They're
ma'am.
already there.
I missed it. Thank you, Sherry. All right. Feeding infants too early or too late has serious consequences in the growth and development of infants. And so we have 6 consequences listed here on the slide, and they are also listed in your reminder binder on page 76. So we're going to have you use your annotate tool to put an E in the boxes of statements that would be a consequence of feeding infants too early, and an L in the boxes of statements that would be a consequence of feeding infants too late. So let me turn on that annotate tool, and I'm actually going to just go ahead and sort of talk through some of these. I'll give just a few seconds for you guys to get your annotate tool. You're going to use the big T for text. This should be a little easier because you're not typing words. You're just going to be typing an E if it's a consequence of feeding too early, and an L if a consequence of feeding too late. Some of you might want to start down here on number 6 so that we have some information in all of them. What about number 4? They could drink less breast milk or formula than needed for normal growth and development. So if you're using the draw tool, you might consider using the text tool instead. It's a little bit easier. All right, while y'all continue to do that, choke on food as a consequence of feeding an infant a little bit too early. They're not quite ready for that solid food, and so they have more likelihood of choking. There could be nutrient deficiencies, especially in iron and zinc if they're fed too late. There could be an unwillingness to try new foods if you miss that window of feeding them a little bit too late. Okay. And if you feed them too early, E, they might drink less breast milk or formula than needed for normal growth and development. Really, you need to focus on those first 12 months. The main food is that iron fortified infant formula or breast milk. Feeding too early could cause them to be overweight or obese later in life. But if you feed them too late, number 6, that could be some delayed growth, speech, and motor development. And again, Sherry has those answers she's going to be putting in the chat. Thank you, Sherry. I see it this time. Appreciate that. So I'm going to stop the annotate here. Save, and then I'll clear these so we can move on to the next. So we're almost to break here. Once an infant is developmentally ready for solid foods, taste preferences and eating habits are being formed. So making your childcare site is an important part of children's experiences with food. So as a childcare provider, let us know how you support the development of infants' feeding habits, which can help them get a healthy start. I'm going to show and read a series of statements here. And if the statement on the slide applies to you, stand up and find someone to give you a fist bump. So if you're all by yourself, don't worry about it. Just turn on your camera and give a fist bump to your camera, and we'll give you one right back. Okay, so here's the first statement. If it's true for you, stand up and give a fist bump. Do you or your site communicate with the parents or guardians of your infants at least one time a week? If that's true for you, go ahead and stand up, give somebody a fist bump, or we will. Here you go. Fist bump. And thank you, Samantha has found that fist bump emoji and is using that in the chat, and that works too. All right, sit back down. Here's the next one. Do you or your site offer new tastes and textures to your infants instead of just sticking to the same one all the time? Stand up if that's true for you. Give us a fist bump. All
Oh,
right.
Pamela found that fist bump as well.
Awesome. Good job. Sit down, and here's the next one. Are you particularly careful in avoiding choking hazards? Do you even have that in mind, or have some resources that you can use to make sure that you are avoiding choking hazards? So if that's true for you, go ahead and stand up and give us a fist bump. All right. Sit back down. And finally, this one's maybe a little bit tougher because there seems to be some pressure in some circles to feed infants early, but do you or your sites wait for signs of developmental readiness before offering solids? If that's true for you, go ahead and stand up and give us a fist bump. All right, guys. Okay, guys, thank you for participation and posting on our Ask It basket. I'm going to look at just a couple of these real quick. I don't know who wrote this, but we are going to be talking about infant preference forms and who tells you when the infant is developmentally ready or not next. Okay, so hopefully we'll answer your question there. Here's one for snack. Is bread, cracker, cereal, and fruit veggie required components if the child is developmentally ready, or are those foods optional and the providers can only offer the formula or breast milk? So great question. Those foods are optional only until the parent or guardian determines that the infant is developmentally ready for those solid foods. And so once that determination is made, then yeah, that fruit, vegetable, or combination is required, as well as the bread component. So if you have more questions about that, please reach out to your local ESC specialist. It will also be providing these answers in our frequently asked questions. For infant formula, the parents usually provide to the centers, how do we determine if it is acceptable as a sponsor? You have to know what formulas are creditable or not. And so that's why we went over those 3 criteria. So again, if you have more questions, please reach out to your local ESC specialist. Okay, did you guys see anything? I think the question that was posted in the chat was the same one I just covered. Anything else, guys, that we should cover before we move on? Okay, let me just tell you a little bit about helping us create a farm fresh generation by taking the Texas Department of Agriculture Farm Fresh Challenge, which will occur during the month of March in 2022. It is a fun and engaging way for you all to earn recognition for your efforts to bring local and garden-based learning activities to your sites while also supporting the local economy. And the challenge is fun and beneficial to the whole community, and it may be easier than you think because some of the foods you already serve could be Texas products. So sometimes distributors for milk and fresh produce, even in the grocery store, may be sourced locally. So if your milk, produce, or other food items come from Texas, that means you're already meeting some of the challenge requirements. So keep these dates in mind. Come early to the next live session at around 10:15 on February 9th, and we will provide more detailed information about the Farm Fresh Challenge. We'll have some slides to talk more in detail about that. And in the meantime, you can go to Square Meals, which we've linked in the chat and in the reminder binder on page 77. Or as always, you can contact your local ESC specialist. Just keep in mind that CEs have to take the pledge by February 14th in order to get some of those additional resources that you can get from TDA. All right, Brenda.
All right, so let's get back to the topic of communicating with infants' parents about what infant foods should be fed while in your care. Communicating regularly with parents and forming a strong relationship with family benefits everyone, the baby, the family, and you. And of course, successful partnerships must include two-way communication. USDA has created several communication tools that CACFP providers can share with families in order to help with that communication. So let's look at some of those scenarios to see what USDA resources we might use to successfully communicate with families of infants. You can find these scenarios and a place to mark your answers in the reminder binder on page 78. Okay, here's the first scenario. Baby Kim still needs help holding her head up and cannot sit on her own. She doesn't seem interested when food is around her. Her parents want to start her on solid foods, but you do not think Baby Kim is ready. Which of these three communication tools shown on the screen would you use to help explain when infants are ready for solid foods? Use your annotate tool to stamp the handout you would use. So would it be tool A, is your baby ready for solid foods? Tool B, tell us about your breastfed baby? Or tool C, varying your baby's veggies? If you don't want to annotate or you can't, you can also answer in the chat. Okay, Donna said tool A in the chat. A.
Okay, it looks like we're all on board. So I'm going to disable that chat for this one, or disable the annotate and
Okay.
clear the drawings.
So yes, you would use tool A, is your baby ready for solid foods, which goes over the signs of developmental readiness. Okay, so here's the next scenario. Baby Mia was just enrolled at your child care center. You know baby Mia's eating solid foods, but aren't sure what her parents have given to her at home. How can you gather this information? Which of the three communication tools shown on the screen would you use to help explain when infants are ready for solid foods? Use your annotate tool again to stamp the handout you would use. Would it be tool A, is your baby ready for solid foods? Tool B, what is your baby eating? Or tool C, varying your baby's veggies? Okay, we're getting quite a few annotates on the screen.
Yeah, I'm glad. It seems like everybody's tracking along. Mostly, we just wanted to make sure that everyone knew about these tools, because that is a common question that we get, Brenda, is how can I help, some help for communicating with families? So
yes, definitely. So we're getting some B's in the chat. Okay, so tool B, what is your baby eating? Helps parents identify the foods and the textures that are being offered to the baby at home. Okay, here's our last scenario on the topic. Baby Ella's parents let you know that baby Ella does not like vegetables. Baby Ella's parents tell you not to give her any vegetables during the day. You know baby Ella may be making faces because she's just learning new tastes and textures. What can you do to encourage baby Ella's parents to not give up on feeding her vegetables? Again, using your annotate tool stamp, stamp the handout that you see on the screen that you think is appropriate. Would it be tool A, is the baby ready for solid foods? Tool B, what is your baby eating? Or is it tool C, varying your baby's veggies?
Yeah, again, it looks like we're all tracking.
Mm-hmm. Great job, y'all. Yes, you would use varying your baby's veggies, which provides parents with some ideas of foods and textures that can be offered to infants at different ages. Communication with parents during the infant's growth is an important part of the process. Again, the FIG has different talking points to discuss with the parents, along with handouts to share when you need help with parent communication. So next, we must ensure that we have all of the required documentation in place for feeding infants in CACFP. Okay, so we've talked to the parents. What's next? Let me know if you agree with the statement on the screen. Providers must document what food should be fed to infants according to the parent or guardian. In the chat, give me a yes or no. Or you can use the reaction button tools to select check if you agree and X if you disagree.
So far, it's unanimous.
Yes. Yep.
All right.
All right. So yes, in fact, it is a requirement that sites and providers capture specific parent preferences regarding how infants are fed. We need to capture the parents' preferences when the infants enroll in the program. Anytime changes occur, including new foods given to developmental readiness, and within 1 month after an infant moves from 0 to 5 month age group to the 6 to 11 month age group. So TDA has an infant feeding preference form that CEs may use to document the parents' preferences for their infants in care. The TDA form is an optional form, but the CE must capture all of the same information if they use an alternate form. One, on the screen, we are showing TDA's current infant preference, feeding preference form. There are 8 elements or pieces of information on this form that are required on any infant feeding preference form that you use. Okay. Take your annotate stamp tool and mark the 8 required elements.
Okay, so I've got that annotate tool on. So we're looking at the 8 pieces of information that are required elements on an infant feeding preference form.
So we're getting some participation.
All right, I'm going to disable that annotate here. I know probably don't have all 8, but here, 3, 2, 1, and then I'll click here to see if we got them all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So remember, regardless of what form you use, all of these pieces of information or elements must be captured on the infant feeding preference form. Now let's talk about when this form needs to be completed and or updated. We're going to launch a poll. So give us a few seconds to launch that poll and let me know if these are true or false. So the infant meal production record or alternate, which we will discuss here in a few minutes, must reflect the parent's preferences. The infant feeding preference is one of those forms that packs quite a bit of information into it and is a really important document. With that said, please make sure that your organization has strong written procedure, that the staff are trained on for updating the form in the same time period, the period that is required.
All right, Brenda, let me just go back and say that the answer was all of the above in case you missed it,
Yes.
and those are listed out in your reminder binder as well.
Exactly. Thank you, Lori. We see quite a few old infant production records when we are working with CEs. So let's spend a little bit of time making sure that everyone has the right form. Go to your reaction button and give me a thumbs up if you are using the current TDA infant meal production record you see on the screen. And in the chat, let me know the date of the most current form. So we'll give you a few seconds to do that.
It's good to see some thumbs up and no thumbs down. I think they do disappear, those thumbs up, after a few seconds though, so that's why they keep going down. We probably have more.
February 19, yeah.
There's some dates.
Yeah. Great
Yeah,
job,
the
y'all.
dates up here on TDA forms, there's a date, so you know that the latest, the form that you should be using has that date. So good job, everyone.
Okay, so Lori, may CE use an alternate infant meal production record?
Actually, yeah, they may. Either the infant meal production record that TDA provides or an alternate form is a required form that is used to track and show that all meals and snacks served and claimed are reimbursable. However, alternate forms must include all the required elements that are found on the TDA created form, which you see here on the screen or on the slide. And the TDA form with instructions, as well as a tip sheet, both of which can be used to determine what those required elements are linked in the reminder binder on page 83. It's also important to remember that when an alternate form is used that may have been modified from the TDA created form, Texas Department of Agriculture, which you see kind of up here at the top left, and the form number H1530A, which you see right here, have to be removed. So those items would have to be removed. You see them, I've got them X'd out here with a red mark.
Thank you, Lori. It is important to cross-check the infant's preference form with the infant meal production record to ensure that the infant food offered reflects the parent's preferences. So let's work on a few scenarios to see if the CE is following the infant preference form. So here you see Susie is 3 months old. Her mom prefers to use a formula that the site is providing, infant meal Lipo. On 6/9/2021, how would her mom mark the following portion of the infant preference form? So using your annotate stamp, show me which box the mom would check in this section of the infant preference form. So I'll give you a few seconds to do that.
Okay, I'm gonna close that annotate in 3, 2, 1.
Okay, great. So great job, everybody. Thank you for participating. So mom came in on 6/9/2021 to complete the infant feeding preference form and check the second box, allowing the CE to feed Susie the formula the site is providing. Okay. So the CE provides infant meal Lipo. Therefore, this is what Susie's infant meal production record would look like. The meal production record should reflect what the parent selected on the infant feeding preference form. In this case, it does. So let's go over another scenario. Sam just turned 7 months. His mom does not believe he's ready for solid foods yet. Which box should the parent or guardian mark? Again, using your annotate stamp, show me which box the parent would select in this section. So we'll give you a few seconds to do that.
Again, Brenda, it looks like we're all on the same page.
Yeah, good. Great. Yeah, we're getting box 3 in the chat. Great, you guys. Good job. Okay, so as preferences change, such as a change in the formula, the CE or site must update the infant preference information. In addition, the infant feeding preferences must be updated within 1 month of the infant moving from one age category to the next. So this is how the site completed Sam's infant meal production record. Based on what was marked on the infant's feeding preference form, what's wrong with this picture? In the chat, let me know if Sam's infant meal production record is correct. If you think something doesn't match the infant preference form, what is it? I'm going to give you a few seconds to answer that in the chat. Anybody? Peaches and cereal? Okay. Solid foods. Looks like we're on the right track. Peaches and cereal. Solid foods.
I think we got it, Brenda.
Yeah, I think so. I think we got it, Lori. All right. So Sam's mom indicated on the infant feeding preference form that Sam was not ready for solid foods. Yet, according to Sam's infant meal production record, the CE fed Sam solid foods. This is an example of why in infant feeding preference forms and infant meal production records should be cross-checked. Regardless of the age of the infant, the parent's preferences should be honored. So Next one, are CEs or sites required to provide meal modifications for infants with disabilities? In the chat, let me know what you think about this statement. So I'm seeing a few yeses. Great.
All yeses so far.
Yeah. Okay, so CEs and sites are required to provide meal component substitutions to an infant when supported by a medical statement for disability. However, if the infant's disability only requires textural modifications, a medical statement is recommended, but it's not required. CEs are not required to provide the exact substitution requested, but they must work with a parent to offer a reasonable modification that effectively accommodates the infant's disabilities. Okay, a medical statement is required to stay compliant with CACP guidelines when provider substitutions for disabilities. The medical statement should include description of the infant's physical or mental impairment that is sufficient to allow the CE or site to understand how it restricts the infant's diet. It also must include an explanation of what must be done to accommodate the disability. And it is signed by a licensed physician or state recognized medical authority. So Lori, may CE request more information if the medical statement does not contain all the necessary information to allow a CE to understand what modifications to make?
Yes, of course, they may. However, please keep in mind that CEs may not request additional information with the intent to try to figure out if the infant really does have a disability or not.
Thank you, Lori. CEs and sites must document any meal modifications. The latest TDA daily meal production record has a section to document substitutions. CEs and sites are required to document substitutions due to disabilities and/or due to medical or special dietary needs. Make sure you keep on file a copy of the licensed physician or state recognized medical authority medical statement or written request in both the CEs and the sites files if the CE and site are in different locations. Documentation is key. So we have talked about several resources that CE and sites can use to make sure that you have all the information you need for feeding infants. You may use these resources to train providers, operators, menu planners, sites, and other staff. You will also find content from the FIG brought to life in the USDA in-person training resources, including slides, games, and quizzes. Trainers for sponsoring organizations can pick and choose from a variety of lessons to create a training that best suits the needs of their CACP operators. In addition, the CACP Halftime 30 on Thursdays training webinar slides are available from USDA to train CACFP staff about feeding infants. These presentations are designed for interactive 30-minute trainings. You'll find the link in your reminder binder under training tools.
Okay, thanks, Brenda, for those reminders. So let's think about the resources that we might need as we work with feeding infants in the CACFP. We have 3 resources shown here on the slide: the Feeding Infants Guide, which we've marked as A, the USDA training tools, which include slides and digital games, and we've marked that B. And finally, we have the infant feeding preference form, which is marked C. So on the right here, we have 7 sticky notes with the information that we might need when feeding infants in the CACFP. And most of you are going to go to your reminder binder on page 87 to write down on each sticky note if you would go to A, B, or C to find the information needed. Now, we're about to go back over to the Miro board, and I'd like to ask the first 7 people who write their name in the chat once we get over to the Miro board, so you got to be comfortable with going to the Miro board. We're going to ask you to move these stickies over to the resource that they belong to. So if you would like to give the Miro board a try, go ahead and write your name in the chat. Remember, you'll either need to be on a desktop or tablet, probably or in a phone app to move the sticky notes over. So while you're writing names in the chat, and I know at least seven of you will, I'm going to move over to that mirror board so we can see folks start moving those sticky notes over. So let me
We
get
have
to the right.
Stacy.
So Stacy.
Anybody else?
I'm going to bring everybody over to me. Okay, so again, you guys should be able to move these sticky notes, and you're going to just drag them over. You'll click on it and drag it over to the right resource. So we only have Stacy
And Maria Elena.
Okay, so Stacy, if you'll take one, Maria Elena, if you'll take two, and Gemma, if you'll take three. And just go ahead and move those sticky notes over to the resource you believe they should be on. I'm gonna make this a little bit bigger so we can see. We have anybody else willing to take a sticky note? You guys having trouble? I don't see you there. Do I need to bring you over again? Okay, and anybody else who doesn't want to put their name, you can't move it, Stacy. All right. So let's just take anyone who can move those sticky notes. Go ahead and put them in the right place. And meanwhile, we're going to have Sherry. She's got the right answers that she can put in. There they are. Thanks, Sherry. So that everybody has the right answers. But we're just practicing on this Miro board. Good job. Infant's food list is definitely over here in the Feeding Infant Guide. One pagers for communication with parents is also in the Feeding Infant Guide. Slides to use for training is in the trainer's guide here, as well as videos about feeding infants. And then the infant formula offered is indicated on that feeding preference form, the infant feeding preference form. So thank you guys for that participation. And we'll just, again, you'll have access to this board where you can ask more questions, see what our responses are, and you can just keep practicing if you think it's fun to do that. Thank you guys for your participation. So we'd like to invite you to next month's live session, which will be taking place on February 9th at the usual time in the usual place, which is the second Wednesday of every month from 10:30 to noon. And you get that link by registering with your local ESC specialist. So next month, feel like renovating your CACFP meals. Join our team of master meal builders as we discuss how to avoid CACFP disasters, such as missing meal components or using foods that aren't creditable. And on the flip side, we'll put on our tool belts to build meals that are not only reversible, but beautiful and nutritious. And there's more. Get your hands dirty as we inspect meal substitutions. So you don't need a miracle, just make CACFP meals right. All right. So we do appreciate the time that you spent with us today. We will be posting a form for you to fill out that will enable you to get a certificate for today's session. Remember that you can continue to submit questions through the link that you see here on the slide, the QR code, that's on the slide. And it's also always available on the ESC Live Google site. But we encourage you to reach out to your local ESC specialist to talk through any questions that you might have regarding specific circumstances in your CE. So please join us on February 9th, and we look forward to seeing you then. Melinda, I did see a note from you, but it's way far back. Is it something you need to say to everyone? If you're still with us. It was about Farm Fresh.
I am. I just wanted to give you an update. I know we've been talking about it. So we are working on getting some other food components as acceptable local Texas products. So stay tuned, and just want to let you know that it might be even easier to meet the Eat Local requirements that we have out right now.
Thanks, Melinda. So we'll be able to give you the latest updates again at 10:15 on our next live session on February 9th. So we look forward to seeing you then. Yeah, thank you for joining us. As Brenda says, I'm going to play some music for just a couple of minutes to make sure that we've all got the certificate link and all the questions are answered for now.